Okay, on to today's lesson on the age of exploration with our little quote there saying no risk, no reward, because that is a reality. A lot of times when you want to have a reward, you definitely need to risk something in the process. So, a little startup question here. Why does Evel Knievel try to jump over cars with a motorcycle? Well, that seems like a silly thing to connect to exploration, but watch this little video here and then come back and we'll answer the question.
Is this the real deal or not? The Australian native, he dedicated this to Evel Knievel, the Knight of Knights.
Okay, so now that you've watched that video, what are some of the reasons somebody might do what that guy did? And that was not Evel Knievel, but another motorcycle rider. You could say a lot of different things. You could say because they want to become famous, because they want to make a lot of money, because they want to be well liked by other people. There are a lot of different reasons, and sometimes people just like the adventure, right? And the reality is that a lot of the reasons and a lot of the motives for jumping over cars with a motorcycle, even though that seems strange, might be the same for somebody who wants to take a risk and go explore elsewhere in the world. So today what we're going to be looking at for this lesson is this specific target. I can explain what motivated individuals and countries to explore new lands at the end of the Middle Ages. Notice we're talking about individuals and countries. So I want you to look at it from both perspectives. What's going to motivate a country to support this, and what's going to motivate an individual to take the risk. Here we have our explorer getting ready to take off. He said, now which way is India? Somebody off in the distance says, I think I might be able to help, and you guessed it, it is Super Wilson. He said, how about I kick off your journey in the right direction? Sure, thanks a lot for the help. And see, I kicked it off. That was a really good one, huh? Okay, and he kind of hits the target. Thanks, but I didn't think you meant kick so literally. Okay, background here. When we looked back in time here, we spoke a lot about how feudalism was holding Europe back. It was the status quo, no motivation to work hard, and there really wasn't much invention, so nothing was really changing. That all changed itself because change started occurring after Pope Urban II called for the Crusades, and there were many crusades taken. They were designed to take back the Holy Land and to help the Christians to regain land that they felt was very important that was taken from them by Muslims. They came from the Turkish lands out in the Middle East. Now, the Crusaders, even though they weren't necessarily successful in all of their voyages, what they did bring back were new goods. And a lot of these new goods were very, very intriguing and desirable to the kings and lords out in the West, and they wanted to find more of these new goods because they were so desirable. In order to get these routes, in order to get these goods, they needed better trade routes. Because while Asia had some trade routes, Europe did not. When you look in Asia, this is the Silk Road. This is their network of trade that we have here. And if we're looking out over in the eastern portion, you have a whole lot of trade going on here. The problem is that Europe does not have access due to this right here. These arrows, and I know they might be a little bit confusing, but what's going on here, and why am I pointing all these arrows here? Keep in mind what just happened in the Crusades. You have losing a war lost to these people here who are the Turkish, the Ottomans, over in this region. So are they going to allow the Europeans to travel through here? No way. So let's just clear off this map. While we might think that this is going to be a great area and we can just go to the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, these areas are not going to be accessible to Europeans at this point in time in history, which means they're going to have to find another route. Now, theoretically, what they could do is they could travel on land and come back one more time, and they could just kind of take, what about doing this? What if we do this stuff and we just kind of work our way around? Couldn't we just do that? And the answer is, well, no, because it's not very practical. Why? First off, you're not talking about dealing with money, where you're going to bring a bunch of money with you and say, hey, I'm going to trade my money for your goods. Now, in some cases, they would be using gold, but gold, even like other bartered items, is going to be very heavy. And when you're traveling by oxen, that's not very feasible. So that would be super, super slow and very dangerous. Because keep in mind, if you're traveling with a lot of gold really slowly over land, don't you think you're going to be a target? You definitely would be. Also, the weather's a problem because snow, rain, everything along those lines is going to be big time problematic. Now, this is not the type of road they would have had then. This is far superior to a road that you would have seen in the 1400s. But even a road like this today, you get enough rain on it, and what are you going to see happen? Well, it's going to turn very sloppy and muddy. And imagine traveling out east with all of your goods in a wooden wagon and something breaks or you get stuck in the mud. That's a big concern, as well as the fact that you might need to bring food with you, which would be really hard to bring all of that and actually store it. So, not going to be a good deal going out east. Now, we referred and spoke a little bit ago in this class about the magnetic compass and the astrolabe, two inventions that are super important that allowed for navigation on the water. The magnetic compass points you in your direction, north, south, east, or west, using the magnetic pull of the Earth's surface. And that's going to be one very, very important instrument that allows for us to travel on water as well as land, but water is what we're really focusing on now. The astrolabe is the other one, which allowed for people to know their location of latitude by using the stars. This is very important because now people can use the water a little bit more effectively to determine where they are. So, we have these abilities and this capability to use water now. What's going to stop people from really going and traveling on water to great distances beyond just the Mediterranean Sea? Well, there are definitely a few. First off, there's this big misconception that people really feared this whole fall off the edge of the earth thing. That was grossly what should we say? People grossly overestimate how underestimate the knowledge of the people of this time. They knew that the Earth was round, and they had known that the Earth was round for a really long time. In other words, that it is a sphere. They just didn't know the exact size. So while that might have been a fear going back in time to the early ages like Rome, not so much whenever we're talking about the Middle Ages and Christopher Columbus. A fear that they did have, though, was that there would be these scary, huge monsters. I know, very scary. And scariest part, they're Pitt fans. Or I don't know, they or it or whatever. But yeah, people really feared these stories of sea monsters that came up and destroyed boats. And well, where would these stories come from? Well, think about it logically. If you have people going out to sea and not making it back, and you see a big whale, let's say out there, maybe you think it's this terrible, terrible animal and monster out there to hurt somebody, because people don't know better. And do you think the boats went out west and into the ocean and never came back? Definitely yes. I mean, that happens if you go forward in history in the 15, 16, 17, 18, 1900s. I mean, think about the sinking of the Titanic. The only difference is we had better communication then, so we actually could get reports back on what happened. If you go back in time to the 13, 1400s, their communication wasn't anywhere near what ours is today. So this fear of monsters was a real fear, even though obviously it is not something that they should have been afraid of. A very practical thing for these people to be concerned of, though, is the fact that you might run out of food. Now, pizza, probably not going to be their food, and cupcakes, not so much. But food, it could spoil, and if you're going out into the ocean for too long, you're not going to have a very easy time finding more food either, because the only thing you can really get is fishing, or fish through fishing. Doctors were not common, and their practices for medicine were very, very poor. Wait till we talk about the Civil War here coming up here in a few hundred years and how bad their medicine was, let alone when we were talking about the 1400s. Medicine, not great. Lots of people died due to disease. Another big problem is the native people in the lands that you encounter when you're traveling and exploring. We're not going to just sit by the fire and sing Kumbaya. A lot of time it results actually in war. Ferdinand Magellan, one of the greatest known explorers of all time, actually didn't even make it back from his huge exploration all the way around the world because he was killed in a battle with natives. Interesting, isn't it? So, what motivates them to do this then? It's pretty simple. Money and power. The same thing that causes motivation for just about every other crazy thing that people do out in the world. Whether it be making a fool of themselves on TV, trying to work really hard to get really strong for a sport, or working really hard to be very intelligent. Money and power. Those two things really drive most things. Adventure is another part of this. People do want to have adventure. They want to get out. They want to stop doing the lame, boring stuff that they're doing when the majority of these people are farmers all the time. So it's a good change of pace. Some people want fame. These things are pretty natural, and I think that when we talked about what people would want if they were, or what the desire is out of somebody jumping over cars with a motorcycle, it's really, really similar. Now, what are the end results of all this? Well, first off, we have a new world opened up, which you're going to be looking at with Columbus here really soon. which is North America. Also, South America is discovered. Soon we're going to be able to make a map of the world, which is really impressive because prior to this time, they don't know how big the world is. There's a huge over-exaggeration as to how long Asia is and an underappreciation for how large the oceans are. And people don't even realize the Pacific Ocean exists. So you have a lot of things that are missing that people don't know about the world. Soon that will change once we start getting a lot of explorers out there because they do map their routes as they go. And soon we'll find numerous routes around the world that will enable us to get from everywhere into everywhere. So to just make sure that you're thinking clearly on this, let's just write down some ideas here. And this will actually lead us also into the next lesson on Christopher Columbus. Let's imagine that you are the King of Spain. You're approached by someone who wishes to set sail for India going westward. Should you pay for their voyage? Think about it. Is that worth it? You know the technology. You know the risks. Is it worth it? Create a pro-con chart to help you decide here, and you can work with some people by if you want. Now, when you come back, here's some ideas to think of. So push pause if you didn't think about it yet. Take a few minutes and do this. But here's some ideas. Why might you want to do it? You might say, hey, we can gather a lot of great, or not gather, but we can gain great trade routes, which will help us to gain a whole lot of money. Because if you can trade with some of these countries and get new goods, that's going to be awesome. We can get new land, and new land means we can have free land. We can have more resources. That too is awesome. The cons, well, some really simple ones. It's really a very risky investment. If you pay a lot of money and a lot of gold into trying to get a voyage that goes east or west, excuse me, and it fails, then you don't get any of that money back. All your money is gone. So it's kind of risky. Things to think about here as we progress forward. So I hope that lesson makes sense though on the age of exploration and what motivated both people and countries to go and take these voyages of exploration.